joined by Mr. Robert Clarke, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Thank you for coming on this morning, sir.
Always my pleasure.
And happy Independence Day to you.
Thank you very much. Wish you the same.
Well, looking through some of the high points of the president's speech, I mean, looking at the one at 53, where at that time there was this talk about the national conference, the atmosphere was completely different from what we saw now. Security always grabbing the headlines at the time, yes, as much as they are at this time. But the president's speech, from what you've seen, I mean, having listened to it, how did you internalize the message from his speech?
Well, let me confess, for the first time in my life, listening to speeches from heads of states and past presidents, I have a feeling that a new beginning is showing up in Nigeria in terms of developmental prospects. Whether these developmental prospects are going to be created by government or are going to be created by the private sector is what is yet to be proved. The private sector have done their best, and I can assure you that as of today, most of the developmental progress in Nigeria has been done through the private sectors. But notwithstanding that, I have observed, and I'm on board to say it, that within the past 12 months, and listening to Mr. President, things are now taking shape, where government itself is now putting its hands into all aspects of developmental progress. And I believe, from what I listened to him, we will soon get to that stage. The dredging of the rivers, the new rail lines being constructed, agriculture has peaked a lot, especially in the production of rice. And again, I listened to him. He has also said that the amount of money Nigeria pays for importing has drastically gone down. That is kudos to this government. But that does not mean that we have gone there. We have got there. We have not gotten there at all.
Because speaking about economic empowerment, which some of the policies and projects or programs which you highlighted have got to do with, he says that they've got this, given them this directive to have 3 million jobs annually. We know that unemployment is a big issue here. But do you get a sense, how do you think Nigerians feel about all of these policies? As much as they are, do they really connect with these policies?
Let us look at the divide. Let us look at Nigerians who are on the upper segment. Let us look at Nigerians who are in the middle class, if there is any middle class. And let us look at Nigerians who are in the lower class. Your question, whether it has an impact, has to be looked from these three-dimensional programs. For people on top, life is so buoyant in Nigeria. People who have access to contracts in government, people who have access to lifting of oil, people who have access to smuggling of oil. To them, Nigeria is a big haven, life more abundant. To the middle class, and when you talk of the middle class, which has been eroded in Nigeria, and which is coming back little by little, it is not there yet. No nation can survive without a middle class. No nation. Nigeria lost that middle class about 10 years ago. Little by little, the middle class is coming in. But also to the middle class, these are people who send their children to private schools rather than to government schools. These are people who, are in one trade or the other. Life is changing a little bit, but there are many hazards still there because of the failings of government in providing infrastructures that could have boosted, their earning capacities. To the lower class, I'm sorry to say, there is no impact on the life of the lower class man. The lower class in Nigeria are still subservient to everything that is good. They scrounge to get a daily bread, to even eat 2 meals a day. And to them, nothing is happening. No kerosene to the common. As I said, I was doing a case in Bayelsa, which is this citadel of oil in Nigeria. And I saw women and children running around to buy kerosene. That shows you that that class of people still don't see any benefit from what Nigeria is, providing.
It's, I don't know how to put this now, but it does look like a contrast. In one bit, we say that, we seem to be improving, that this speech was quite upbeat and possibly shows an improvement in our general fortunes as a country. At the same time, we say that the poorest of the poor, or those in the lower cadre, are still not feeling the effect of governance. If Nigeria were to be moving forward, where will be the first place to feel it?
Let me be honest with you. The population, if you take it in a ratio manner, the ratio of the Nova-rich, the ratio of the upper class, when you look at it, is just about 1/5 of the ratio of the totality of Nigerians. So we are now talking that about 75% of Nigerians are not feeling the benefit of governance and the good things that government says it is providing. And why is it? It's because, let me give you an example. A typical Yoruba man or Hausa man or an Igbo man does not want to depend on government. A typical Yoruba woman who is a trader wants to go out in the morning, sells her wares, and provides food even for the husband. The typical Igbo man, they don't need government's money. What they need from government is an atmosphere that will enable them to carry on their small businesses. Like a bicycle repairer, like somebody who blows tires. He needs electricity. Mostly you find them buying generators. Mostly the generators are there, they cannot put petrol inside the generators. You see, these are the things that you and I don't feel for ourselves because we are not in that class. But those who are in that class, who are ready to go out and not depend on government, do not have the facilities to enable them to do so. That is the problem in Nigeria.
I'm looking at, you've been around a long time, and you say that this morning, for the first time, you felt upbeat about developmental strides, But we're looking at, when we hear a lot of elderly people speak, what we hear is that the good old days, in fact, the old days are always good. It's like it would seem that, the nowadays are the days that, people are wondering what is happening. But it would seem that it's a little different for you, is it?
You see, when you look at the old days, you look at life expectation, you look at it objectively, you look at it subjectively. When we were young, we got what we wanted. There were no hassles. We had in the boarding house, we had electricity 24 hours. We wanted to go and wash our clothes, we go to the tap runs. That's what we call the good old days. And we still remember that in the early 50s, in the early 60s, politicians were telling us, we'll give you water and light. Now, the same story is the same story. Politicians are still telling Nigerians, they go to the villages, we will supply you with electricity, we'll supply you with light. What we had in the good old days, what we thought as of right we had, today they don't have it. That is why you can say the good old days. But the standard of living was lower than what we have today. Let us be honest about it. In those days, if you are able to eat bread in the morning, then you are eating a good meal. But today, the cheapest food anybody can buy today is bread because they cannot afford, any other thing more than that. So you can see that the good old days were good subjectively or objectively, depending on the individual. But nowadays, the hassle, that is the point I want you to note. In our own time, the hassle to get the good things of life was not there. It came to us. Government provided them. Today, the hassle is very high. For a young man to survive, to be able to pay house rent in Nigeria today, let me tell you what is happening. Once schools are reopening, I take myself as an example. If you know the number of people who come to me, oh, my children's school fees is due, please help me. You know, the proportion is going up every time. And you ask yourself, what is happening? People cannot afford to maintain children in school. And the standard of education in Nigeria is falling down. Let's be honest about it. So people have to go to the private school.
And the fees are not reducing.
The fees are not reducing. Do you know that Nigerian universities cannot boast of one single university in the first 10 in Africa? And also the first 20 in Africa were only one in number 14, University of Ilorin. South Africa has 7 universities, 7 in the first 10 in Africa. Egypt has the remaining.
But are we being unrealistic? We must take into cognizance, we are 54 years old. We've had a very checkered history. We've survived a civil war. Yet we remain together. A lot of people say that our greatest achievement, I mean, if you listen to the president's speech as well, he hammered on that, the fact that we are a resilient country. We've seen terrorism now after democracy came back in 1999. Yet we still remain together as a country. We realize that we have issues, you know, but are we looking to run before we have even crawled? Where exactly are we?
Look, let me tell you where we are. The Bible says, or the Quran says, to whom much is given, much is expected. You see, when you look at whether we have genuinely, you know, in having a good developmental, you know, situation in Nigeria, you have to look at what has been made available to Nigeria. Between 1960 and 1999, the amount of revenue accruing to Nigeria through oil is not up to 1/3 of the money that has accrued to Nigeria from 1999 to 2014 today. And when you look around and see what was done in terms of development from that little money Nigeria had for 30-something years to the development in Nigeria today from the money Nigeria had from 1999, you will be ashamed.